worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. Oh, I worship you, Jesus. I worship. You're turning lives around. You are here, oh, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship. You're mending every heart. You are here, and you're mending every heart. I worship you, yeah. I worship you, Lord. And you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, you're the waymaker, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, sing it again. You are, yeah, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, it's who you are, Jesus, yeah. The waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is, sing, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh, and that is who you are. That is who you are. My Jesus, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, we lift you up. That is who you are. That is who you are. My Jesus, yes it is, yeah. It's who you are, waymaker. Let's sing this together, even when I don't see it. Come on, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Come on. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Oh, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop, yeah. Oh, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, yeah. You never stop. You're the one. You are waymaker, light in the darkness. Oh, his name is above. His name is above depression. His name is above loneliness. Oh, his name is above disease. His name is above cancer. His name is above every other name. He says, that is who you are. That is who you are. Jesus. And that is who you are. Oh, I know that is who you are. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you, Lord, that is who you are. Your name is above all names. Your name is above every situation. And thank you that you are on our side. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that you are a good, good Father. Thank you for this morning in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks. You can have a seat. So it's my honor to introduce Norma Puga to you. She is the director of Champions Club in Lakewood Church, America, in Houston, Texas. She's been director there for over 10 years, and she runs every part of the curriculum and aspect of the ministry. In addition, she has helped launch numerous Champions Clubs all over America as well as the world. We have, I think, about 4 Champions Clubs running in South Africa already, so that is amazing. And then she has certifications in child safety and children dealing with trauma. She really has a heart for the kids, but also for the families of neurodiverse families and special needs families. And it's just beautiful to hear. So we're looking forward to learn a little bit more and to hear your heart. Thank you, Norma.
Thank you so much. It is truly an honor to be here. I see some familiar faces, so I'm glad to see you guys came back. Yes. So today we're going to do things kind of in reverse. I will this afternoon after the tea break, I'll kind of talk about our program. So for those of you who may be interested in starting our program, I'll kind of go over it and I'll talk about our curriculum and how that gets applied. But we want to start off with talking about volunteer expectations when you're talking about a ministry where you're going to be working with children who have some sort of special need. So we can start with the volunteer expectation slide. And one of the things that, we look at as far as volunteers, you can go to the next slide. One of the things that we look for in volunteers, one, for me, I don't think it needs to be written down. It should be kind of an automatic, and that's having a heart. You have to have a heart for these children. First and foremost, having, education or background and experience and all of that is great. That's wonderful. But if you don't have a heart to serve the community, you're just kind of doing the work. And, one of the things that I've learned in doing this for so many years is, our kids, they pick up our emotions. Our kids pick up, our actions. They pick up everything. And if you're doing it just to do it, you probably won't get the response that you normally would from a child. So first and foremost, we look for someone who has a heart, someone who, knows And like I mentioned last night, what's important is, to look at the child. Don't look at the behavior. Don't look at the diagnosis. Don't look at anything else but the child. When you see the child first, it's so much easier to be able to approach and really be able to interact and build that trust and build that relationship with the child. But apart from heart, what a ministry looks for, if you're, if one, let's say you're interested in volunteering, or two, you already have a ministry, or you're looking, to start a ministry, one of the things you want to look for in a volunteer is commitment. That is very, very important, is commitment. Because the only way that you are going to be able to establish that relationship with a child is if you make a commitment to that ministry, and you make a commitment to that child or the children in that ministry. One of the things that I know from my families and my kids is that they're there every single week. Every single week. Unless, obviously, something happens, they go on holiday or they're ill, they're there every week. And, not only do they desire and need that structure and consistency in a program and in a ministry, they need it in people as well. So my volunteers actually make a commitment to serve every single week. It's 2 hours a week, and so the way I look at it is, I give my tithe every week in monetary value, and then, when I was a volunteer prior to coming on staff, I would give my time as well, in addition to the tithe. And I can tell you, I have been blessed beyond measure, just in doing that. So when you're looking for volunteers, it's really important that you help them understand why the commitment is important. That you help them understand who they're going to be working with, and why committing to this ministry is extremely important. The next thing is dedication. They need to be dedicated to this ministry. Sometimes I will get volunteers that they want to be an usher, and then they also want to serve here, or they want to be a greeter or a prayer partner, and which is great, which is absolutely amazing. But then, they're torn. Then if there's an event going on here, or there's something else, their other ministry requires them to do that, then they're torn. Excuse me. So I ask them to be dedicated to one ministry, to pray about it, to seek God. Where is it that God is leading you? But to be dedicated to that one ministry and give your whole heart to that ministry. So dedication is also, extremely, extremely important. Again, I say have a heart to serve with special needs. Second, the last one is willingness to invest time to build a relationship. So that is crucial. We all know, as adults, that we just don't go up to a complete stranger and just pour our hearts out. We don't go up to a complete stranger and ask them, to drive us somewhere. We don't go to a complete stranger and just invite them into our homes. We build a relationship, and that takes time. That's not something that happens overnight. That is not something that even happens within a month. It takes time to build a relationship. So again, with the commitment, the dedication, the heart, comes the building of the relationship. Once that relationship is established, you will then build the trust. And when you build the trust, is when you'll be able to get your kids to respond to you. When you build the trust, you'll be able to give a directive, and they won't have to doubt you. They won't have to wonder what it is that you're asking them to do, or are you going to comply with what you have promised. So those four things are key when we're talking about volunteer attributes. You can go to the next slide. So how do we start by building this relationship with a child? First thing is you want to observe the child. So, for instance, brand new child comes in, chances are, I've done it, I've tried it before, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but, going up to the child and start engaging, they don't know me. And so a lot of times kids will pull away, and so then I'll know, okay, you know what, I need to respect their space. I need to, honor, that they're just not ready yet. But I observe, what are they drawn to? What's catching their eye? What do they like? And I give them time in the space to kind of take everything in and figure out, what is it that's piquing their interest. Once I determine that, then I go and I approach the child. Again, keeping the distance. A lot of times, even with us, especially me personally, personal space is very important to me. I don't allow a lot of people in my personal space. And I'm sure it's the same with you. If a complete stranger came and got right in front of you, you're probably going to take a step back because they're entering into your personal space. It's very important that we respect that in our children. And a lot of times we don't. We just take it for granted that they're children and we go into their personal space. And it's very important that we respect that. Not only just in children with special needs, with all children. Is respect that personal space. Second that I have there is mimic the child. So if he's engaging in an activity and you want to join in, mimic. Not too long ago, I had a new child that came in, and again, I was observing, and he was one of the ones that I just couldn't get too close right away. But he was doing this really like he would, and do something like this. And so and he kept doing it, and I was trying to figure out, when does he do it? What's causing him to do it? Is it a particular reason he's doing it? And so I was trying to, engage. He really wasn't responding. Again, brand new, so I didn't really expect a lot. So what I thought I'd do is I did the same thing. So I went up to him and I did this, and he just looked at me like, whoa, like she's understanding me. So a lot of times mimicking them, you're almost like entering their world. And I noticed it was like a small little shift in, like he was giving me a little bit of eye contact. I would give him something and he would take it from me. So sometimes if you don't know how to approach the child, or they're not responding with what you're doing, then if they're doing something, different, or even making a noise, I've done that before. Whatever they're doing, I've mimicked that, and they'll look at me, not, realizing I'm hearing what you're doing, I'm seeing what you're doing. For them, it's almost you're speaking their language. So a lot of times just mimic them and just kind of see the response that you get, because a lot of times you will get them to respond to you. The third one is called do a preference assessment. So I know this young lady here, she's got a lot of experience, so she understands what that is. So let's say you have a child goes into a room. In my rooms, I have a lot of options for the kids to choose from. I have toys, I have puzzles, I have games, I have all kinds of items, Legos, I have everything, because I'm trying to find something that I can use to work with. I'm trying to identify what is called a reinforcer. And so sometimes the kids are so overwhelmed with everything that they want to pick up one of everything. And so what's recommended is that you identify the item they really, really want to work for, what's going to really pique their interest. But let's say you have a child and they pick up 3 things. One is I'm probably not going to allow them to play with all 3 things at one time. I'm going to make them choose. So I'm going to tell them, do you want this or do you want this? Then he'll probably choose one. Then I'm like, okay, do you want this or do you want this? And then he may pick this. And I'm like, okay, do you want this or do you want this? And let him choose. Once he chooses that one thing, then now you've got your reinforcer. Now you've got what he's willing to work for. But let me preface this by saying that it doesn't mean that this is going to be forever. This reinforcer may only last 5 minutes, or it could last a year. I had one of my little guys that I had like a little interactive little table, and it was portable. And that little table needed to be in the room every single time he went into that room. It didn't have to follow him wherever he went. It just, when he went into that particular space, that table had to be there. So I always made sure that that table was there. It wasn't distracting to him. It was more of comfort. It's familiarity. Like, it's there, everything's going to be okay. Sometimes kids, will identify something they like, and then that's what you use to work with. I talked about, schedules yesterday and first then, and what you want to do is once you identify what they're willing to work for, now you got a tool. And so what I normally do is like I present an activity, whether it's, a play activity or an educational activity, whatever the activity is, and I'll ask them, I'll give them a directive. I'll say, write your name. And especially if it's a new child, you kind of want to, if it's a new child, you just kind of want to gauge it. You don't want to give them too much. It's not super, super important that they do everything that you normally do on a Sunday or on that particular day. It's not important. The important thing is that you get them acclimated to the space. That's the most important thing. And you start building that relationship and that trust. But once they start coming, now you want to put in your structure and your consistency. So then if in that space and in that time frame, they're gonna work on an activity, then you start setting up those expectations. You start explaining what needs to be done, what is the expectation. And one of the things that I mentioned last night too, is that it is your responsibility to effectively communicate what your expectation of them is. Never ever assume that just because you're walking into a classroom that they're going to automatically go and pull out a chair and sit at the desk. If they do not do that, it's because we failed to communicate what that expectation was. You can give a directive and you can say, okay, let's go in the class and let's sit at a table. If they don't do it, then you may have to be more visual about it. You may have to say, sit here. Or you may have to pull out the chair and sit yourself and say, do this. Simple commands, but you have to, if they do not respond the way you first give that directive, then you need to change it up until they get an understanding. And then be consistent with it every week until they kind of understand. Again, structure and consistency are going to be your best friends. So if you keep the same structure, if you keep the same consistency, then that expectation has already been communicated. And if that child follows through, then you have effectively communicated. But once you do that preference assessment and you identify what that child's willing to work for and you give them a directive, sometimes they'll do it, sometimes they won't, depending on the activity. If they like it, they may do it. If they don't, like some of my kids, when it comes to doing the educational portion or the creative learning portion, they just don't want to do it. So that's when my reinforcer comes in. It's like, okay, I want to play with this. I need you to write your name first. So even if, some kids will write their name right away, some of them are still learning. Some of them are testing you. Some of them may just like, well, if I put this pencil down long enough, she's going to give up on me and I won't have to do it. But that's when you come in and you're like, you got to do this. Even if, for my kids, even if they write one little line, I'm reinforcing. Here you go, good job. And then, but I don't give it to them for a long time. Usually 10, 15 seconds. I'm like, okay, my turn. I take it back and I give them another directive. Okay, let's learn how to write your name. If they don't know how to hold a pencil, then you use hand over hand. You put your hand over them, over their hand, and you help them write their name, or whatever the case may be. But when they comply, you are to deliver that reinforcer right away. You're building trust, so that the next time you ask them, you may only need to ask them, one time, and they may be able to do two things: write your name and fill in the first blank. Then you can deliver the reinforcer. And then what you want to build up to is that they'll be able to complete a whole, activity before they need to be reinforced. Sometimes you can eliminate the reinforcer altogether. Like my little guy, he just needed to make sure his table was there. And he did everything. If I were to remove the table, he would come in and he would be looking around. He couldn't focus. So for me, it was important that table stayed there. Now, there is such a thing of a reinforcer being too strong. Okay? So when you have when you identify a reinforcer, and especially some kids become very obsessive about something, and they need to have it. They need to hold it. They need to play with it. They won't let it go. They don't want to share. That means that it's too strong of a reinforcer. They do not understand the concept of working toward it. All they want is they want it. If it's something that you can remove, I would recommend that it be removed before they get there the next time. Again, I had a little one that had these little alphabet, and they turned into little robots. So I had the whole alphabet, I had enough for 26 kids. He wanted all of them. He would not share, not one. And so, and he'd say, they're mine, and I'm like, well, actually, they're mine. I'm sharing them with you, so I want you to share with, your friends. And he just couldn't. He would not let go. And on top of that, he wasn't even willing to work for them because they were too strong. He was just so focused on it. So what I did is the next week he came around, he walks in, he goes straight to the bookcase, and he pulls out the little box that they were in, and they're gone. So, and I looked around, and I just kind of pretended I didn't see him do that. And, he wasn't verbal, so he couldn't come and tell me where are my alphabet robots. And so at that point, I engaged him, and I, tried to kind of redirect him, and I showed him something else, and I brought it to the table, and, and I got him to work, but it was too strong of a reinforcer. And so it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind at that point. Once I redirected, and once I kind of got his attention, he forgot about it. And I'm sure, once he left, he wasn't crying at home for these robots. He wanted them there, but it was too strong, and he wasn't willing to give them up. The other thing that is, that could be a really strong reinforcer that I have to watch is I have iPads, but on my iPads, I have a communication app. And if for some of you guys, if you have children and they're not verbal, a communication app is really, really useful. We use one called ProLoco to Go. And so basically what that is they get to tap on a picture, and that picture says the word for them. And last night I gave a story about one of my guys who, he wants me to dress the same every single Sunday. He wants me to wear the same clothes every single Sunday because he does that for Mom. He chooses Mom's clothes for every day of the week and for every activity that she's going to do. And, I understand Mom is picking her battles, right? But I won't let him do that to me, and it drives him crazy. So he brings his communication device, and he comes and he tells me, Sunday, church, Norma, black, because he wants me to wear black pants. He wants me to wear black pants, black shoes, and a gray t-shirt. That's what he wants me to wear every single Sunday. So if I am not in uniform, I get the device, Sunday, church, Norma, black, and he points to my pants. So what I do is I purposely do not wear black. I have not worn black to church in probably 3 months. And black is my favorite color, as you can see. So it is very difficult for me not to automatically go to my black pants and wear them. But I do that because I need to change it up for him. Like, I need to challenge him a little bit on those kind of things. If I'm not there, he's walking around, Sunday, church, Norma, like, where is she? And, and so I had to tell Mom I wasn't going to be there this weekend or last weekend so she can warn him so he could be prepared. But so with the iPads, kids are very savvy with technology. Oh my goodness, I have two great stories. So when I first got the iPads, I took them to our IT department and I told them basically lock them down. I just want the kids to have access to the apps that I have on there. I do not want them having access to anything else. So I had these iPads, handed them to the kids that needed them because it was for a communication, for the kids who were not verbal. So I left, at that time I think there was 2 kids in there, so I gave each one an iPad. And this was in the beginning, so we were kind of getting everything together. I walk out of the room and I come back and one of the kids is on YouTube. So I'm like, how in the world did you get through? I took this to our IT department to lock it down, and they figured out a way how to get through. So one of my other little guys, he was 4 at the time. And so when they're little, I just gravitate to them because most of my guys are big already. And so I would sit with him on the beanbag and I would have my phone with me and, I would have it locked down, but he would go through it, he'd swipe and, there's nothing that would come up. And so I let him, play with the phone, but I never put and it wasn't this one, it was an older one that, it wasn't the facial recognition, it was the one that you had to put in the code. I never put the code in. I never put the code in front of him. So I left the phone with him because I walked out and I came back and he was in my phone, like he was on the internet. And I'm like, how in the world did you do this? Like, nobody's supposed to do this. Nobody's supposed to be able to do this. So, you need to be careful with the devices because these kids figure out a way to break through those things. And so sometimes an iPad can be too powerful because they know the access that an iPad has and they know how to get to certain things. So, if you're going to use the iPad as a communication device, then you make sure that you are there monitoring that because the last thing you want is for them to be watching something inappropriate on YouTube while they're under your care. So, but I've had to remove the iPads because some kids have been like, and I'll give them a timer. I'm like, okay, 5 minutes, and then I get it back because I do have some Bible games on the iPad. So sometimes once they finish their work, they get to do that, and I give them 5 minutes, and I give them a timer and a countdown, and then it's like it's my turn. If they do not give it back to me, then I know it's too strong of a reinforcer. So therefore, the next week I won't give it to them. So just save yourself a lot of trouble and heartache. And just take those reinforcers away that are too strong for them. The fourth one, build trust. So important. We all operate out of trust with one another, right? We ask people to do things for us because we trust them. They ask us to do things because we trust them. It's the same thing with kids. You have to build trust. In order for you to start that process of trying to teach and trying, get them to work for certain things, they need to trust that you're going to deliver on what your promise is. And the only way you can do that is by, making sure that they know, what you're going to do. You be consistent. I deliver reinforcers right away, all the time. And that's why I feel, my kids, trust me, because they know I'm going to give them a directive. Once they comply, they immediately get the reinforcer. So build that trust so that you can get them to comply easier and faster. Fifth one, don't give up. So important. What I can tell you is, I know back in the U.S., our, our school classrooms, there's so many, kids that have, a different diagnosis and there's not a lot of help for them. So, the kids that need that, most of the attention normally get it. The ones that are aggressive, the ones that are runners, the ones that, need more hand over hand. And then the others don't get as much attention. So what they've learned, basically, is if I hold out long enough, they're going to give up on me. And that means I don't have to do the work because they're either going to, let me slide or they're going to do the work for me. I gave an example last night of one of my kids that, when he was little, I coddled him a lot. Part of it was my fault. But, I asked him to do an activity and I asked him to write his name. And every time I'd give him the pencil, he'd put the pencil down. And I probably did it 3 or 4 times. And then Mom, one day happens to ask me, it's like, why are you writing his name? I'm like, well, because he can't. He's like, yes, he can. He's more than capable of writing his name. But he had already figured me out. Okay, if I hold out long enough, she's going to give up on me, and I don't have to do it. So that following week, you better believe I sat there next to him, and I'm like, I'm not leaving here until you write your name. And his name is Emmanuel. It's not like it was Roy or Ray, Emmanuel, and he spelled out his entire name all at the same time. So all of this time, I had either been doing it for him or not, making him do it. And he's still, at that time, he was probably about 6 or 7. He's 16 and still pulling the same thing. So they already know I can outlast you. I have another little guy who, oh my gosh, when he first started coming, Mom couldn't even get him out of the car, to get out of the parking lot, to walk into the church, to get to us. He would get in the car, but once he got into the parking garage, he wouldn't come out. And so we'd have to go out and we'd have to assist her. But what we told her is be consistent. Just come every single week, regardless. Come every single week. So what ended up happening, because she was telling me at his school, they were pretty much calling her every single day. We can't get him to do this. You need to come pick him up. This happened. You need to come pick him up. So what he did is he trained all the teachers on how to get out of what he didn't want to do. All he had to do is not do it, and guess what? Mom's going to come pick me up and get me out of school. And that's what basically happened. So when he came to us, I guarantee you he thought he was going to do the same thing. So I just told Mom, if you're consistent, if you're committed to this, we will be too. And so week after week, and Mom was very diligent, and Mom was very consistent every single week. And slowly but surely, he was able to, next step was he'd get out of the car, but then he'd sit on the ground, but he was out of the car. And then next he would, we have a small street that you have to cross before you get into the church. He'd walk into the church and then sit inside the church. Or then he went to kind of at the end of the wall, right before you make turn the corner to go into our ministry, he would stop right there and we'd have to go get him. Now he walks in by himself and he does his work. He obviously, he still has, some issues, but as far as that, he comes in. They have no trouble bringing him in anymore. Why? Because we outlasted him, and he realized this isn't working for me here. Either way, they're bringing me inside. Either I'm being carried in or I'm going to walk in, but the result's going to be the same. And so now he walks in, but because we outlasted him. So when I mean don't give up because you can change behavior. All behavior is learned behavior. All of it is learned. That means that you have the ability to change it. You have the ability to shape it. You just have to be consistent. You have to have structure, and you have to make sure that you are effectively communicating what your expectation is. And if you do that week after week, you will see the change. I guarantee you, you will see the change. Whether it's, a lot of times behavior, and I'm going to talk about behaviors in a little bit more in detail, but, most of the times behaviors come out of anxiety, of not knowing what to expect, not knowing what's coming. And, we seem to be masters of just giving directives to our kids without much information and expecting them to comply. Our kids just don't operate that way. They have too much anxiety over that expectation. Can I do it? What is it? What are they asking me to do it? Am I going to like it? There's so much stuff going on, and then that causes the anxiety, which then equals into a behavior. So just, just don't give up on that. Don't give up on them, I should say. And to be consistent, that's another very, very important. I keep saying that because the next two, be consistent and have structure. Very, very important. These kids operate best when there's structure and there's consistency. Why? Because they already know what the expectation is. They don't have to wonder what is going to happen once I go through those doors. They already know. So once you build that into your ministry, you're going to see that most of the behaviors are going to subside. Most of the behaviors are going to start changing because you are, those expectations are still the same. So just once you build that structure and consistency, it doesn't mean that you can't make small changes, into what you're doing, but I wouldn't make drastic changes, and unless they're older and, they've been with you for a while. Like most of my kids have been with me for quite a while. Like I've had them since they were young, and now they're adults. So springing something on them is not really that big of a deal. But for me, I still like to prepare them. For me, it's very important that I'm communicating what that expectation is. And the last thing, don't forget to have fun. When you approach this, you need to approach it with that in mind. Make those activities fun. Make whatever you're asking them to do, make it fun. One of the things that I learned when I first started volunteering in kids ministry is you kind of have to lose your dignity when you work with kids. You have to lose your dignity. You have to approach them at the level that they understand. Which means like you got to get down at eye level. You got to change, your voice, your cadence, all of that is very important when you are working with children. And I'm talking all kinds of children. If you have a 2-year-old, you're not going to walk up to them and talk to them like an adult. How do you talk to a child? You talk to them at that level. So it's important that for our kids as well, that just you have fun with them. They're kids. At the end of the day, they're still children. They still want to play. They just do it differently. So you kind of learn how they do it and you adapt. But have fun. When you make it, more clinical and you're looking at just a result, not only are you taking the fun out of it, but that child probably won't respond to you had you not approach it as, let's do this fun activity. And just, be animated. When I tell a story, oh my goodness, I have them laughing. I have them, mimicking what I do. I have them moving. That's what they want to do. That's what's going to capture their attention. If I just sat there and just like, God created earth. God created light. You know, what are they going to do? They're going to be bored. So I have to be very, very animated. And so that's what you guys need to do as well, and have fun. Okay, next slide. Okay, so basically I just kind of, I took each one of those and kind of gave you like a definition. So like observe the child, and pay particular attention to their likes and dislikes, behaviors, triggers. That's important. If they're, like I mentioned with my little guy with the little robots, if there's, a trigger that is going to cause a behavior, remove it. Now, there could be triggers in there that you have no control over. One, flushing toilets. I don't know what it is with my kids, but they need to flush toilets all the time. So, again, pick your battles. So what I do is I allow them to do it one time. You could either do it at the beginning or you can do it at the end, but you only get it one time. And if they don't comply, then they don't get to flush it at all. So it's, I'm not taking anything away from them. They're making the decision not to do it. So if it's something that they need to do, go in, flush the toilet, and then come back out. And that's it. And usually that works. Instead of me constantly trying to keep them out of the bathroom, because all they're going to focus in is that toilet. I have to get to that toilet, and I cannot do anything until I get to it. So why am I going to fight that battle? It's not hurting me. It's not hurting anybody. Go in, flush the toilet. And then they'll do that, and then they come back out, and they're fine because it's kind of out of their system. It's done. So, the lights, oh my gosh, my kids are like, on, off. And we have 2 doors in every one of our classrooms. So I'll have one kid on one door turning on. I have the other one and the other side turning it off. And I'm just like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You get to turn it on first, and then you get to turn it off, and then we're done. So again, pick your battles. It's not necessary for me to waste so much energy in trying to keep them away from the light switch. It's just not worth it. Just let them do it. Let them kind of get it out of their system, and then you can move on. So that's kind of the method that I use. Okay, the next slide is just mimic the child, like imitate what the child is doing. Don't be afraid to get on the floor, and again, once you build that trust, you'll see that you can get closer to them. If you're able to at the very first time, great. If they allow you, great. But if not, you're going to be able to read based on their response if they're open to you getting close. Okay, next slide. Okay, the preference assessment is kind of and this is kind of the definitions for y'all, so you can write them down. But again, allowing them to choose an object or objects. If they only choose one, then you already got it. But again, the important thing to note is that these reinforcers can change. Like I said, they can change, from week to week. They can change from minute to minute. And you may have to constantly be doing these preference assessments until you can kind of identify what they're willing to work for. Next slide. Build trust. Again, important to do that. And again, by delivering those reinforcers, that's what's going to help you. Consistently praising the child. And I'm going to talk about that more with behaviors, but you want to catch the child doing something good or something appropriate or something right, and you want to reinforce. Basically, you want to praise them for it. Great job. I love the way you're sitting. Great job in doing that work. I love the way you colored that color sheet. That is so awesome. High fives, hugs, whatever. You know that you are doing the adequate amount of reinforcing when you get tired of hearing yourself say it. That's when you know you've done enough. Not more or not too much. That's when you know you've done enough. And once you do that, you will notice that a lot of those behaviors will diminish, because a lot of behaviors are more attention seeking, or they're trying to escape a task. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. Don't give up. It can take a lot of time. One of my guys is, he has Down syndrome and autism, which is, it is a deadly combination, I can tell you, because the stubbornness in him, along with the autism and not verbal. So I'm not kidding you, it probably took me, more than 6 months to find a reinforcer. And do you know what that reinforcer was? I don't know if you guys are familiar with goldfish here, but there are these little bitty crackers that are in the form of a fish, this little. One, it usually comes in little bags. One goldfish, he would work for me. One. And I'm like, I racked my brains. I would pull out Legos. I would put them in different colors. I'd show them different color Legos. Every single thing, I'd pull out every single book. I'd turn different pages. I tried everything to find that reinforcer because the Down syndrome in him was very stubborn. Like, he just didn't want to do work. And so I would say, do you want this or this? And he would just look away, like, oh my gosh, I got to find it. When I found that reinforcer, wow, one, and I'm talking, the little goldfish is about this little. It's not even a full cracker, it's this little. And once I showed them that he would get it, he would do whatever I asked him to do. But how long did it take me? It took me more than 6 months. But the thing is that I didn't want to give up on him because I knew he was capable of doing it. And so once I found that, then the kid got goldfish every single week. I made sure I had the goldfish there, and I was showing him, okay, this is what we're getting today. Okay, next slide. Again, to be consistent, this means that everything you do, such as how you organize your space, your students, and learning material must be consistent. Children thrive on routine and consistency. That's super, super important. Very, very important. Okay, next slide, have structure. So when you make a schedule for your space, make it a visual schedule so that, everybody can see. And stick to it. Like, come up with a schedule that's going to work for you, that's going to work for the child. Post it so it's visual so they can see. Effectively communicate what that is, and make them part of it too. A lot of visual schedules, you can write them out really simple. Like for my classroom, I'll have, okay, we're going to do praise and worship first. Then we're going to do our Bible declaration, and then, we're going to do our Bible story, and then, we're going to do an activity, and then you can have free time. So what I do is after each activity, I have little Velcro dots next to them, and I have little check marks at the bottom. So once we finish praise and worship, then somebody goes, gets a check mark, and puts it on there, like we accomplished it. A lot of times, for me, it doesn't have to be in that order, as long as everything gets done. If somebody decides, I want to do this first, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal as long as everything gets done. But make them part of that. Make them part of the process. Make them part of it. And you'll get buy-in a little bit quicker when they're part of that process. Next one. And again, don't forget to have fun. This is a very important part of building a relationship with a child. Children can sense your emotions. Engaging them in different fun activities will allow the child to open up and become more compliant. That's huge. It really, really will. Okay, so other things to note as far as volunteer expectations. So as a volunteer, you'll have the opportunity to work with children, teens, and adults with various diagnoses or medical conditions. Some of the diagnoses may include autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or developmental disorders. Some individuals may find it hard to function in their typical environments with their peers. They may need a self-contained area to be able to be ministered to, or they may need to be in smaller group settings with caring individuals who meet their needs. So I'll stop right there. So, when you get a child, obviously my goal, we have a self-contained area at our church, meaning that we have the opportunity to control their environment. and they kind of stay in our area. And then I have some that are in an inclusion program, meaning they spend part of our time with their peers, whether it be during praise and worship or during small group time. So, but it's important that you evaluate the child. In my heart, as much as it would tear me apart, but I'd love for all of my kids not to be part of my program. I'd love for all of them to be included with their peers, because that's where they have the opportunity to observe appropriate behavior. But the fact of the matter is that I have kids that deal with sensory integration issues, meaning they're unable to function with their peers. But I do find an opportunity when they can. So for instance, I have some kids that noise doesn't bother them. And so, and they're fidgety and they move around a lot. So guess what? During praise and worship with their peers, I take them in there. And I let them run around and jump up and down, do whatever they need to do, because everybody else is standing up and everybody else is singing and dancing. So I let them do that. That's great. But guess what? When it comes down to small group, they still want to jump up and down. So that's their time. Okay, they're coming back with me, and I have them in a smaller group, and then I'm able to minister to them at their level. And in my classroom, I don't care if you're jumping up and down as long as you're doing the work. So I have some kids that'll come and write something, and then they'll get up and start jumping around, and they come back and write something else, and that's okay. But obviously it's going to be distracting when they're in kids ministry. So and then I have the complete opposite. I have kids, and I remember one time I tried one of my guys. I'm like, okay, we're going to go, because he was higher functioning, and like, we're going to go to kids worship, and it's going to be so much fun. And I take him, and I come out of the elevator, and you could hear the music, and immediately he's like, has this look of fear in his face, and he's covering his eyes. I'm like, okay, no praise and worship today. So that he wouldn't have been able to function in there. It would have been torture for him. So I brought him back with us, but then when it was time for small group in elementary, then I took him, and he was great. So I formulated a schedule and a plan for him so that he still has the opportunity to observe appropriate behavior, but I'm still able to minister to him at his level. So that's one of the things that you want to, make inclusion a part of what you do. And so even if it's 5 minutes, and then you want to gradually increase, some kids, can handle it, but not for long periods of time. I believe any amount of time that they can observe appropriate behavior is going to benefit them in the end. So figure out when is a good time that you can take them in and start introducing them to this new space, and make them a part of it. The other thing too, it helps with your neurotypical kids. It helps them start understanding, that we're all different. And it's okay. And, they start developing empathy for, the kids, and you start teaching them. Because you know what? God created all of us, and God doesn't make mistakes. And so he created this child that way for a reason, and God has a purpose for him anyway. And it's important that all kids understand that, and you have that, opportunity and ability to teach the kids. Another thing for volunteers, it's extremely important to have patience and begin the process of establishing a relationship with a child to have a better understanding of their needs. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're here to minister to them at the level of understanding that they're at. And we're here to meet those needs. And the only way you're going to know that is if you spend time with them and you start learning who they are. And you start understanding the needs and how to deliver whatever they need. But that takes time, that takes commitment, that takes dedication. But I guarantee you, in the end, you will be so blessed. All of my volunteers, will tell you, I came into this ministry because I wanted to be a blessing, to these families. But they'll be the first ones to tell you that I'm the one that has, came out of this blessed. It is an extraordinary ministry. So, and I talked about structure and consistency. It's what you'll see in our program in Champions Club. Oftentimes, having that structure and consistency will eliminate the anxiety and fear that children have when arriving. Keeping that structure so that you're not changing things up. That is what gives them that feeling of calmness, like, okay, I can do this. This is my space. A lot of my kids, when they come into the church, they outrun their parents and they come straight to us because they know we're there. They know where to go, who's going to be there, and they find comfort in that. So that's going to be really key. And then lastly, you have the opportunity to be part of a very special team of individuals who love and accept these children and help, want to point them to their destiny. That is very, very, that's important for us to know that, God still has a plan for them and God has a destiny. And it's a unique responsibility and honor that, God has chose us to be a part of that. And to see them flourish and to see them learn and to see them just grow. We have that unique ability to be able to pour into them and see that change in them. Next slide. Lastly, one of the most common things you will see in a special needs ministry is behaviors. Because behaviors are a form of communication. This may be the only way that child can express their feelings. And I will talk about this more when I go into behaviors, but behaviors is a form of communication. I mean, what happens when babies cry? They can't tell you they're hungry. They can't tell you they have a, wet nappy. They can't tell you that. They do that through their cries. So they're communicating something to you non-verbally. Our kids are the same way. If they're crying or they're acting out, it's because there's a need that has not been met. And it is our responsibility to figure out what that need is. I see kids like this. God kind of gave me this visual one time, and it's like these kids are behind a very thin veil. And it is our job to walk through that veil to meet them where they're at. It's not their job to come meet us, to come to us. It's our job to go to them. So if you look at it that way, you will take those measures and you'll take the time to pour into them and see, what do I need to do to reach them? Some of the behaviors you're going to be, seeing is yelling, screaming, scratching, biting, spitting, crying, attempting to escape a task or the room. Please note, these are all very typical behaviors coming from children who do not know how to express anxiety, fear, frustration, or pain. So when a child has a behavior, something is going on. These kids don't just do it just for the sake of doing it. They are trying to communicate to you in the best way that they can, that there's a need that is not being met. And so by, process of elimination is how you want to figure out what it is. And then you will have the opportunity to be part of a very special team of individuals who love and accept these children and will help them point them to their destiny. The next slide I have is questions, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next one because I think we're a little bit short on time. But I know Justine gave you guys a QR code. So at the end of this lesson, I'm going to be able to answer a lot of those questions. Okay, so the next thing that Justine asked me to talk about was to talk about the common types of diagnosis. Let me get my notes out here. And I kind of pulled up I kind of pulled up some of the ones that we see a lot in the U.S. And one of the ones that I neglected to put on here was cerebral palsy, but I'm going to go over that anyway. So for instance, autism for us, and I'm not sure about here in South Africa, but autism is growing at just an alarming rate. When we started this program back in 2009, it was 1 in 150 kids were diagnosed, which is already alarming. Now the numbers are like 1 in 34. 1 in 34. And that's just in the last, 14 years? 1 in 34 from 1 in 150. So that seems to be, I feel like the diagnosis that we know least about, because every child is so different. And some kids, are born with it. Some kids develop it later. No one's really been able to find out where it comes from, what causes it. When is it going to happen? When has it happened? Some, and I'll talk a little bit about when I talk about our program, the story of our guy Connor. But yeah, Connor was a neurotypical kid at 2 years old, and he was talking and showing emotions and playing, and then all of a sudden, everything stopped, and he regressed. No talking, no eye contact, no emotions, no social interaction, everything stopped. So, it's hard because we do have some children, and even now, they're diagnosing kids, I think as early as 12 months. They are able to diagnose them. So the autism seems to be the one thing that I feel we know the least about, and in spite of the fact that the numbers are so alarming. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I want to just kind of go over some things about autism. So autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. So some of the common characteristics, and I think somebody asked that last night, and these are just common characteristics. These are not the only ones. There's endless. I couldn't even begin to tell you how many actual characteristics. Again, autism, I mentioned it last night. When you meet one person that has autism, you've only met one person that has autism, because every single one is so different. And their needs are different, the way they communicate, everything is so different. Their likes, their dislikes, their triggers, everything is so different. But these are just some common things that we've seen, or experts and doctors have seen. Okay, so first, basic social interaction can be difficult for children with autism, which can make it difficult for them to communicate. It can become stressful and can lead to certain type of challenges. So, it's just like us. If we walked around with tape over our mouth, how in the world would we communicate to people? We're so used to using our words. How would we communicate? We would tug, we would tap, we would hit, then if you get ignored, if you're hungry, and you really, really are hungry, how are you going to communicate to someone if you can't use words that you're hungry? And people aren't looking at you because you're not using words, so obviously you have nothing to say, so I'm just going to ignore you. What would you do? You're going to do whatever it takes, and if this goes on for days, you haven't eaten in days, because nobody will listen to you, or nobody will pay attention to you because you can't talk, what do you think you're going to do? You're gonna start, your behaviors are gonna come out. You're gonna start grabbing people, you're gonna start shaking, you're gonna start hitting. That's what happens when these kids are unable to communicate. That is why those behaviors happen, because no one is meeting those needs, and nobody's taking the time to figure out what those needs are. So when there's a behavior, just know they are trying to communicate that there's a need that is not being met. Most of these behaviors don't happen just because they feel like doing it. It just doesn't. They're trying to communicate that there is a need that is not being met. Some common traits or behaviors in children on the spectrum are things like flapping, unusual or inappropriate body language, facial expressions. A lot of them will avoid eye contact. Some of them dislike physical touch. Or there's definitely a lack of social interaction and difficulty identifying and regulating their emotions. So I remember one time, I'm a hugger. Like, I hug people all the time. And I remember I had this one little girl, and she had come in, and she had been with us for a little while, and it was just definitely my fault. I wasn't paying attention. And so one of the times she came in, I went and I hugged her, and I just went right in and hugged her. Again, I did not, respect personal space. I was not looking for any, and she wasn't verbal. I wasn't looking for any, any nonverbal cues. I just went in and I just hugged. And it wasn't like a long hug. I just went in, I hugged, and I walked away. The following week she comes, I went, I walked toward her, and she literally like cringed. And I was like, whoa, again, she didn't, I learned, not only did I invade her space, but physical touch actually was painful for her. So as I was hugging her, I was actually hurting her. So, and that was my fault because I didn't take the time to look at the nonverbal cues. Had I taken the time and, walked up to her and approached her, I would have probably seen her kind of, pulling back or giving me some sort of signal that she did not want to be touched. So that's why it's important. Observation is really, really important when it comes to our kids, because they will communicate to you, exactly what their likes and dislikes are. Lack of social interaction. Most of our kids are going to play alone. They don't know how to make friends. They don't know how to approach someone. They don't know how to have a conversation. And a lot of times they just don't want to play with anybody. So that's a common trait. Difficulty identifying and regulating their emotions. I see that a lot. I had one of my other guys but he would come in from time to time crying, and I couldn't. I was trying to figure out why. And sometimes he would come in already crying. So I'm like, okay, maybe something happened at home. And so I would ask him, I'm like, what's wrong? He was verbal to the degree that he could answer a question, but he wasn't, or ask for something, but he wasn't verbal to like, hi, how are you? Or carry on a conversation. So, I would tell him like, what's wrong? Tell me, what's wrong? And he would just look at me and he would just cry. And so what we started, showing him was like little cards and, like, you're sad. This is sadness. This is what sadness looks like, And so, and we did that for a little bit and, and didn't really think about it. And then one day, he comes in and he's crying again. I said, what's wrong? And he looks at me and he goes, sad. And I'm like, it broke my heart, and then I was happy at the same time. Because it broke my heart that he was sad, but I was so happy that he was able to identify that emotion and what that felt like. So it's important that we help our kids identify those emotions. When they're happy, show them what happy looks like. Whether in the form of some sort of visual or your face, this is what happy looks like. It's important that you start teaching them, those kind of emotions. Now, regulating their emotions is something totally different, because sometimes, it's hard for them to kind of get their emotions in check. It's hard for them to like, okay, I'm sad. I'm sad about this. I can't have it. Okay, no big deal. Let me just move on. They can't. They hyper-focus on something, and that kind of takes over. And so, but that's where you come in and try to help them, understand those emotions and, try to, either you redirect or, you give some sort of like, okay, once if you can identify what it is, for this particular child, I had talked to mom. And, and I had told her, sometimes he comes in crying, what's going on? Mom didn't really know either because, she was a single mom, had 4 kids. So I can only imagine what her household looked like in the mornings and what could have triggered that and that he carried. A lot of times it could be things that happened the day before or the week before, and it's a memory that comes back. And they think about it, and then it comes out in the form of a behavior. So you're not always going to know what could cause a behavior, but if you have the opportunity to, find out or see it, that'll help you kind of work with the child and help them regulate their emotions. Also display of repetitive body movements, like flapping. I have, one of my guys, I have a couple of my guys that, do this, or this. I had one parent that, came and told me, he goes, can you help me help him stop flapping? So, this was for me, it was a personal preference for the parent. I like to focus on behaviors that are going to be either destructive or aggressive. I'm not going to really worry about those behaviors like the flushing of the toilets or the turning on and off lights. I'm not going to focus on those things. And flapping is just another behavior that is just not that important to deal. And I think for mom, it's because while she was out in public, she just didn't want people to stare at her. And I understand that. I get it. But a lot of times these behaviors and these things that they do are soothing for them. So if you know that there's something that brings you peace or soothes you and somebody's trying to take it away and you need it, what are you going to do? You're going to respond. So so for mom, I did talk to her, and I'm like, how important is this? If I were to tell you that what he's doing is actually bringing him peace and calmness, on the other side of that, if you take that away, then that can turn into something else. That can turn into an aggressive behavior. That can turn into a runner. Those emotions or whatever he's dealing with, that this is bringing him calmness, can turn into something else. So again, every action kind of has a reaction. So you kind of have to look at those things and see, is that worth dealing with and trying to stop if it's not harming him or anybody else. The next slide. Some children have challenges with verbal communication. Many of them are unable to speak, and others who do speak may speak in abnormal tone of voice. Some may repeat words or phrases, while some may not understand simple statements or questions, and others may take what you say in a very literal way. Oh my gosh, I've had every one of these kids. A lot of my kids are not verbal. So but they've been with me long enough that we all know, what their needs are. We know what their triggers are. We know how to work with them. So it's not that. Some of them, use a form of sign language. And some of them kind of adapt a sign language. You may have, we have what is called ASL, which is American Sign Language. And there's different, and most kids that are not verbal don't really, because sign language is a language. And it took me a while to understand that. Sign language is still a language. Just because it's not verbal doesn't mean that it's not. It is a language. And so just like any other language, you have to practice it. And so most of our kids are not going to come out and give you full statements in sign. They're going to pick up words, for instance, for us, water is this. Some of them do this. Or this, and they kind of make their own way. You just kind of have to learn how they communicate. And so some of them will do that. Some of them in an abnormal tone of voice. I have a child that oh my gosh, to me, he sounds exactly like Goofy from Disney. I am not kidding. He sounds identical to Goofy, the way he speaks. So it's like they pick up these voices, and that's the only way I've ever heard him speak. And so, but that's his trait. And again, some of them may not understand, statements or questions. And so when you are, given a directive, that's why a lot of times I'm talking about give short little directives. It's not like, okay, guys, we're going to walk into the room and I want everybody to grab a chair and sit down at a yellow table. That's way too much information for them. Make it really simple statements. And that way, and then you can build from there and you can teach them, what that expectation is, but don't do it all, on the onset, build up to that. And then some kids may take what you say in a literal way. I have one guy who is that way. And so I have to really be careful what I say, because I can't make any kind of references, or I can't make a joke because he's like, what? You're going to do what? And I'm like, okay, never mind. Forget it. Forget I said that. So you just got to be, know your kids. So now I know when I talk to Evan, it's always in very, short statements. I get to the point. I don't joke. I don't do anything. It's just, this is the way we're going to communicate, because if not, he hyper focuses on what I say, on every word that I say. Some people with autism can also be sensitive to noises and typically have a high level of anxiety. So noises, sounds, that seems to be, I don't want to say a common trait, but I see that a lot. A lot of my kids, I have a whole drawer full of headphones. And so my teens and adults, we actually take them into service for praise and worship, because they've kind of worked through all the behaviors. But they'll go in and they'll point, they need their earphones. So if you can, find things like that will help them to kind of be a part of it, then, definitely you want to do that. But for them, they can function in there. It's just, and I know for us, our praise and worship is super loud. Like, I get it. And then you have some that wear it all the time, and it can become a sense of comfort for them. And it's kind of, it doesn't, it mutes the sounds, right? They're not noise canceling. It actually just mutes the sound. So they can still hear, but it's not just as, in your ear. So having those kind of tools is really, really important. Others can be aggressive to themselves and to others. An important thing to note on aggression is if a child shows aggression toward you, 99% of the time it's not personal. It's not personal. It has nothing to do with you. Although most of us can take it personal, like, oh my gosh, he hit me. He pulled my hair. He tried to bite me. He kicked me. He did this. It has nothing to do with you most of the time. It's something that's going on within them. It's a need that is not being met, and he's trying to communicate to you, I need help. I'm in pain. I'll give you a story like, oh, this one broke my heart. I had a little guy, his name was Isaiah, and he had been coming to me for a few years. And then mom moved away, and I think she moved away for about 2 years. Then she came back, and so she brought him back, and I was so excited, and obviously 2 years older, and I don't know what happens in these years, but these kids like grow so fast. And he was sweetest kid ever. And he was in a classroom, and I never had any problems with him, never. Just the sweetest kid. Again, not verbal. And so, when he comes back, and he was probably about 11 at this time, 10 or 11. And he was in a classroom, and he kept going to the door and wanting to leave. And I'm like, this is so strange. But again, I haven't seen him in 2 years, so I don't know what he's been through. I don't know what behaviors he's picked up. I don't know. And I would tell him, okay, Isaiah, it's not time yet. We still have 15 minutes. I'd show him a timer. When this gets here, so when we'll move. And so he would look at it, he'd walk off, and then he'd go right back to the door. And he'd go right back and he did it like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, this is just, again, I'm trying to think, a lot of things have happened. Is this a behavior that somebody or he created where he was before? And I have to be careful. Am I going to reinforce this behavior by letting them go out, But I just thought, you know what? Let me just see. And so I told him, okay, Isaiah, show me. Show me. So I opened the door, and he goes over to the water fountain. He was thirsty. And that broke my heart, because here I am for 10 minutes. I'm keeping him away from the door, and all he wanted was water, And so from that moment, I started teaching him, the sign for water. And that's like water, and that that was a behavior, right? And yeah, I could have thought, oh, he's trying to escape the task. We're not going anywhere. But I took the time to this is unusual based on the last time I saw it. And you know what? And it could have turned the complete opposite. I could have opened that door and he could have darted out, But, I knew who he was before, and I took a chance to see. And it actually, it worked out because I knew that, and I started teaching him how to communicate using like sign. And just words. We don't teach how to, like, I would like to go to the restroom or toilet. I don't do that. It's just toilet. That's it. And so, or water. We give popcorn for snacks, so popcorn is this. So, so that's what we teach so that we can, eliminate those kind of, behaviors. And I don't even want to call it a behavior, but, honestly, anything that is measured is a behavior. Me standing up here, this is behavior. You sitting down there, it's a behavior. Anything that can be measured is a behavior. But the difference is there's, negative behaviors and then there's, positive behaviors. So for him, yes, it was a behavior because he was trying to leave, but not a behavior that, he wasn't aggressive or anything. So you just kind of have to look out for those things. Some may be hyper or hyposensitive to sensory input. So your hypos are like my little girl who did not want to be touched. For them, they actually experience pain from touch. So you have to be, again, read those nonverbal cues and respect that. You may have some kids that, like to run into walls or run into you or, that these kids are requiring and needing like deep pressure compression. So, when I see a child that does that, you have to respect their space. For me, what I'm thinking is, okay, I need to wrap them up in a weighted blanket and, keep them snug and secure. But, if I have not built that trust, I can't do that. So sometimes what I start is I'll get their hands and I start massaging, the palms of their hands, their fingers, and just see how they respond to me. If they stay, I had one child that I started doing that, and then he gives me his other hand. So I'm like, okay, this is what he needed. He needed that deep pressure compression, And so I got him to, go over. We have this huge rocker, and I got him on the rocker, and then I put this weighted blanket on him, and you would have thought he went to heaven. He was no longer running around. He wasn't doing anything, but he needed that sensory input. So again, observing the child, they're going to tell you a lot with their nonverbal cues. And just, administering. Another thing that I've done before is I massage their heads, here, their temples, the back of their heads. And, you start off gently so that they can feel it. And then if they're responding, then you just apply a little bit of pressure, not too much. And a lot of times that helps them. Or if they're laying down, I'll just put pressure on their legs. I just apply a little bit of pressure. And you'll see that kind of calms them. I also have in one of my rooms like a swing that hangs. And it's almost like when they go in there, and it's got a netting so they can see everything that goes on around them. But when they go in there, it kind of cocoons them, and it kind of gives them like a womb-like effect. And even though, and I have it in my physical development space, meaning that's my movement room. So there's kids running around, jumping and doing all of that. But when they're in there, it doesn't matter that all of that is going on around them, because they feel that. They feel that, the curving of their body and the feel of the netting on their skin. And that actually brings them calmness. So, those are just kind of the things that you want to look for when you're, dealing with kids that are on the spectrum. Others may easily become fixated on certain things. We talked about that last night. Some kids will get a little car and just spin the wheels. And that's all he does is spin, spin, spin. And he can do it for hours. That's a classic sign. Or, line their little cars up or trains or whatever. And it has to be in a perfect line, and don't you dare touch it. Don't you dare. Although some of my kids, again, once I've built that trust and that relationship, I will purposely go and move it. Because, I want to get them out of that. You know what I mean? Because that's not reality. And when they leave my space, when they leave my area, the world's not going to line things up for them. You know, the world's not going to change and adapt for them. So I kind of like to push the limits. It's sort of like my guy who wants me to wear the same thing. I purposely do not do that because I don't want him thinking that every person I come across, I'm going to expect them to dress the way I want them to dress when I want them to dress. That's not reality. But, you know, obviously I have, you know, the fact that he feels that he can tell me what to wear tells you that I have a relationship with him. The other thing that he does is if I go to his house, you know, he loves for me to come over, but he also loves for me to leave because he wants to go outside and he wants to turn on my car. And he turns on everybody's car. So, you know, if he has a party at his house, he waits. Minute he sees people going out the door, he follows them. He wants their keys. He gets in their car and he turns on their car. So, again, just like these little quirky behaviors, they're harmless. You know, it's okay. But as far as, you know, other little things, you know, it's okay to challenge them. It's okay to, you know, kind of break that cycle for them if you have the ability, as long as it's not going to cause a lot of, you know, turmoil within them. You know, I wouldn't completely like throw all the little trains off the table because that would definitely, then I'm creating a behavior. But, you know, slightly moving it a little bit or, you know, telling them to share with me. Sometimes, again, like my other little guy, he just couldn't do it. But if I can push the box a little bit, then I do. Then I try to, because I also don't want to create a behavior. Okay, next slide. I think that's all we had on autism, right? Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is cognitive impairment and intellectual disability. So let me just kind of give you the definition. So cognitive impairment and intellectual disability are terms that describe limitations in mental functioning and skills, such as communication, self-help, and social skills. These limitations can cause people to learn and develop more slowly than others. However, the two terms are completely different. So like a cognitive impairment is usually caused by some sort of injury or, you know, like a traumatic brain injury or some sort of, you know, accident or something that happened. Usually these people were fully functioning before it happened. So it's actually like a regression for them. So, but you know, the side effects is a little even more difficult because they were able to do this before and now they find themselves that they can't. So now the other one is the intellectual disability. And I deal with more with ID than the cognitive impairment. So these are people that consistently score, you know, a below than average IQ. The intellectual disability also includes a component related to individuals' functioning skills in their environment. They can appear during the developmental period and not just in adulthood. People with intellectual disabilities may also have other impairments such as cerebral palsy, seizure disorders, vision impairment, hearing loss, or even ADHD. So basically, you know, somebody with an intellectual disability, you know, again, may look very typical, but, you know, cognitively there's a delay. And so, you know, a lot of my parents, you know, with kids that have an intellectual disability, you know, will come and tell me, yeah, you know, he's 15, but he's at a 9, you know, he understands like a 9-year-old, or his, you know, cognitive level, he's at 9. And so it doesn't mean that they can't learn. You just kind of have to adjust the way they learn. You know, you have to kind of make the activities a little bit more, you know, less challenging and in a way that they'll understand. Like I see a lot of ID in the U.S. Like we do have a lot of our kids, teens and adults that, you know, come in with ID. So that may be something, I'm not sure if it's how prevalent it is here, but if you know, find someone who, you know, on the surface, you don't think there's anything wrong, but yet when you start engaging them, they're just not understanding, and chances are it's some sort of intellectual or cognitive impairment. And so some of the characteristics, this is for cognitive impairment. So it's memory loss and trouble concentrating, completing tasks, remembering, following instructions, solving problems, changes in mood or behavior, loss of motivation, or being unaware of surroundings. So that's, again, these are individuals that at some point probably experienced some sort of trauma that made them regress. Okay, next slide. Now, intellectual disabilities, these are guys that learning and developing more slowly than other children. Like doing simple little gross motor movements like rolling over, sitting up, crawling, or walking, they do it much later in their developmental age. They have difficulty communicating or socializing with others. Making and sustaining friendships in personal relationships can be challenging due to the inappropriate behaviors and their poor language development. And then there's limitations in self-care, such as, they're unable to dress themselves, they're unable to, bathe themselves. There's those kind of limitations. But it's not to say they can't learn. You just have to, the way you present the task has to be a little bit more simplistic. Because they still have the capacity to learn. They may not be able to do, a complicated math equation, but you can teach them, what 1 + 1 is. You can teach them, basic math. That's, they're still definitely able to learn. Okay, Down syndrome. I'm not sure how prevalent Down syndrome is in South Africa. I know for us it can be. It really is prevalent. And with Down syndrome, so Down syndrome is a genetic condition, and it occurs when a person is born with an extra chromosome. And so it I put in the definition, chromosomes are small packages of genes that determine how the body develops and functions. The extra chromosome can affect how a person's brain and body develop, causing physical and mental challenges. And you can go to the next one. The Down syndrome characteristics are really more physical. You can see on the surface, you can see somebody has Down syndrome. For me, one of the things about Down syndrome that is not physical is their stubbornness. Oh my goodness, that is a very, very, very common characteristic of somebody that has Down. They will do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and at the time they want to do it, and in the way they want to do it. And if you're not careful, you don't know how to approach, you probably won't get them out of that. You have to approach it in a way that it's their idea. And you got to kind of switch the situation around and do whatever you can so that it becomes their idea. And that to me is a very, very common characteristic. Okay, next one, ADHD. So back in the U.S., we used to have the ADHD and a separate ADD diagnosis. They were separate. Now it's been combined in the U.S. So if you have ADD, you're going to be diagnosed with ADHD, which to me was kind of strange because hyperactivity is the whole purpose of it being ADHD. And if you have a child that has ADD, they may not be hyper. But for some reason, they kind of grouped everything together. But it's a developmental disorder that affects people of all ages. It's most well known in children and teens, and the symptoms can interfere with daily life, including school, work, and social relationships. So somebody with ADHD or ADD, they're going to be neurotypical if that's the only diagnosis, right? I have some of my kids that have dual diagnosis. They have autism and ADHD. But if you just have a child that just has ADHD, I usually do not recommend that they're part of our program. Yes, in a lot of a lot of behaviors come with ADHD, right? Because they get bored, basically. They're bored. They want to do something else. They have no interest in what's being presented to them. And especially if you're asking them to sit for long periods of time, it's just physically impossible for them. And it's not something that they're choosing to do. It's not something that they have control over. So you just kind of have to work in like, okay, we're going to do this, and then I need you to do 10 jumping jacks. Or need you to jump for 5 minutes or whatever, and then come back and do work. Like there's a way of doing it without having to make them part of, your special needs class. Because a lot of them would tell you, and I've had some of my kids, that tell me like, why am I here? I'm not like them. And that kind of breaks my heart, because you're right, you're not. You have something that you can't control. And unfortunately, they're disruptive to a typical class. And so it's hard. It's hard for these, these children to kind of fit in, because they're definitely not like my kids, but they're not like these kids either. So, I try to, if I have kids with ADHD, and I recommend that they stay in kids' church, and then I just kind of give the volunteers, give them a break, have them go outside and, hop, jump, whatever they need to do to kind of exert that, and then bring them in. And if you need to do that every 10 minutes, and do it every 10 minutes. But I'd rather you do that than bring them into where we're at, because they really don't need to be there. And then some of the characteristics, difficulty staying focused and paying attention, difficulty controlling their behavior, obviously hyperactivity, difficulty staying on task, sustaining focus, staying organized, losing things necessary for task or activity, easily distracted, being forgetful. I mean, those are all things that they really do not have. They just don't have the ability to control. And it's not because they're misbehaving. It's not something that they want to do. It's just something that they cannot control. And then the last one, you can leave it there. The last one is cerebral palsy. So again, it's pretty prevalent in the U.S. as well, and I don't know why I forgot to add it to his, but I'll just kind of tell you. Okay, so cerebral palsy is, a problem that affects muscle tone, movement, and coordination. It happens when the brain can't properly send messages to the muscles about how to move in a smooth or well-coordinated ways. So there's a disconnect, our brain receives millions of signals through our senses, through all of our senses, right? Not only our, sense of smell, touch, see, but we also have other senses of, where our body is in the space. It's called proprioception, and then there's vestibular. So those are like two extra senses that a lot of people don't talk about. But all of these senses, send information to the brain. Then the brain tells the body how to respond. So if there's a disconnect, the brain may be receiving the information, but if it doesn't get to the body, then the body can't respond. And that's why a lot of times, like kids that are on the spectrum don't understand danger. And they'll just run out in a street with moving cars, because they're not receiving the information to be able to identify what danger is. So really the same thing happens with, kids with CP. Some of the characteristics that you'll see is lack of muscle coordination when performing voluntary movements. They may be in wheelchairs. Some of them, they have stiff muscles, exaggerated reflexes, weaknesses in their arms and legs. Sometimes if they are walking, they'll walk on their toes, They're delayed in reaching, developmental milestones. Sometimes they shake, they have shaking hands. They have random, uncontrolled movements. And then they have delayed language. They have delayed language, speech, and communication developments. And I've had some kids that have CP that are verbal and can communicate. And I had one girl, her name is Mariah, and years ago when Mariah was younger, she would communicate with me, and we would laugh all the time. You know, I'd make her laugh. Then COVID hit, and obviously I didn't see her for a few years. And then I got in contact with Mom, and Mom had said that she'd been experiencing a lot of seizures. So then by the time Mariah came back, she lost her speech. So, and it was so sad to see that, you know, I could see like the light had gone from her eyes because she wasn't able to communicate like she used to. And she used to love to laugh, you know, and even when I tried to engage her in laughing, I could tell that there had already been some damage there from the seizures. So cerebral palsy, you know, affects while there's some common characteristics, you know, it does affect the child based on any other conditions that they may have. Okay, so the next thing I had, how are we on time? Okay. Sure. Okay, so we're going to go on a break, right?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do the video?
We can do the video. And
Okay.
then I'll
Perfect.
do the introduction for the break.
Perfect. Okay, so what I want to do is I kind of want to show you a video. So I'll kind of set it up. At Lakewood, every year we have a job and resource fair for our special needs kids, our teens and adults. So we identify resources that provide some sort of service or some sort of product that will help the community. And then we also identify employers that are looking and have positions open and available for individuals with disabilities. So we have this fair and we invite the community, and we normally do that on a Saturday. Then on a Sunday, we do what we call our Champions Weekend. And we usually select a special song that, you know, kind of really represents our kids. And then we have all of our families come on stage. And for us, it's really to bring awareness, you know, to the congregation, because we know, you know, that a lot of families stay hidden. A lot of families are shut in. And so what we want to do is we want to bring awareness, and we want people to know, like, they're out there and they're probably sitting right next to you right now. And so we're going to show a video of a song that we chose, and then you can see all of our families. But I think for me, this is one of my favorites. If you just kind of listen to the words, it really, really identifies, you know, what our kids go through.
I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say. We don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one will love you as you are, but I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. Gonna send a flood, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Now, 'cause here I come, look out, 'cause here I come. Marching on, marching on, yeah, yeah. This is me. Come on, help us with your hands here. This is me.
All right, guys. Beautiful. Come on, tell them how much we love them. Hi. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Isn't that amazing?
Sure, that's really very special. May we have our own special needs Sunday with families on our stage. And all the churches represented here, I think what really touches my heart that every person needs to be heard. Wherever they are, it's difficult to speak. I see those tears. But yeah, I think that's just God's heart. Every person is special, every person is loved, and everyone deserves to be heard.